Marshall Chriswell is with us, another installment of Marshall Law, and this radio program intended to be for informational purposes only. The information does not constitute legal advice. The law is constantly changing. The information may not be complete or correct depending on the date and your particular legal problem. Each legal problem depends on its individual facts, and different jurisdictions have different laws and regulations. Because of that, you should not act or rely on any information in this segment without seeking the advice of a competent attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction for your particular problem. Marshall Chriswell is one of those. You can call, by the way, if you have a question for Marshall, 479-1160 or 349-WCCS. That's 349-9227. And good morning.
Good morning.
The heat outside prompts me to ask you this question. Libre's law is now effective in Pennsylvania, which has to deal with keeping your pets in cars with the windows up on a very hot day, 75 degrees or warmer, then you are subject to a citation. We, of course, have those laws in effect for children, too. You should never leave your child in a car, no matter what the temperature is outside.
Right.
But when people, through neglect or through a simple forgetting, when they receive citations in the mail, because many times these things come by the mails, but sometimes they're given right there in person. What do you do when you get a citation?
Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is be very cognizant of there are going to be deadlines. There's going to be dates on the citation. You know, you have so many days for which to enter a plea. Mm-hmm. And if you're planning to just pay the fine, you have so many days to pay that, and additional fees can be tacked on after that, penalties and additional costs. So first thing is be very, very cognizant of what the dates are. And the next thing that you want to do, and sometimes if it's a traffic citation or whatever, and you say, okay, I'm just going to pay it, and that's fine. But if you have any question about whether the citation, whether you're actually guilty of what you've been accused of, or whether the citation is valid, then you want to consult with an attorney because that we're the ones that either know or can research those laws, and also can get in touch sometimes with members of law enforcement, who are the officer that issued the citation, or the district attorney's office, if that's what's necessary, to kind of get some more details and see if this is something that is worth fighting.
Legends always grow up around particularly court systems, and I know that I can challenge this and go to court, and the cop won't show up, so that's a surefire way to get off. Trying to manipulate yourself around the court system and the penalty that would be incurred by blindly accepting a citation. You mentioned just a few moments ago the fact that, we don't know the laws. We're not inside the law community. So we really don't have an idea of how it works, but sometimes we listen to brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law, friends, and whoever, the guy down at the on the next bar stool, and we think, okay, I can beat this.
Yeah.
We've talked before about do-it-yourself law. Not a good idea.
It's not. I've heard some of those things that you just talked about. The officer won't show up, or that they misspelled my name on the citation, or some other minute detail, and that's going to invalidate the government's entire case against me. And that's just generally not accurate at all. I've only had. I'm thinking for all the traffic citations and misdemeanors and things that I've handled, to show up and have the officer not show up, I think has maybe happened once when there was an emergency situation.
It happens all the time.
The officer didn't make it. Yeah, and so it's just not. It's not all that common. You're going to want to, if you're planning to challenge a citation, a ticket, a criminal charge, you want to do so. You want to build a good case and have good reasons for doing it. You can't just rely on the fact that the officer isn't going to show up.
Many cases get resolved at the district court level, in the magisterial district courts.
Absolutely.
Probably the majority of cases get resolved there, I would think, and certainly when you're talking about summary cases, that's what happens. There is a new procedure, I guess is a way to put it, in Pennsylvania for expungement, and for that not showing up on your criminal record for the rest of your life, that when you go for a job 15 years after you got caught underage drinking, that's not going to show up on your record and scotch your effort at a job. Could you discuss that a little bit, the new law?
Yeah, and so expungement, there's two different things. Expungement is actually wiping out the criminal record. Expungement in Pennsylvania remains a pretty difficult thing, even for summary violations, which are just, for lack of more specificity, just a step above a parking ticket. Okay, a summary violation. It's less than a misdemeanor, and then a misdemeanor is less than a felony as far as severity. So even for a summary case, it's 10 years before you can get that expunged. And the misdemeanors and felonies, there's really very little recourse as far as getting those expunged completely. But there was a law passed, signed by Governor Wolf a couple years ago, which allows you to, I think it was kind of termed the clean slate law. It can protect, it can seal certain criminal records. You can apply to have certain criminal records, lesser offenses, sealed so that law enforcement can still view them, all right? And they still would show up in some background checks, but they would be shielded from view for things like employers and landlords. And there's a specific, there are certain offenses that are covered, that you're permitted to have sealed, and there's a procedure for doing that, and you've got to bring a petition and things. But yeah, and I think that's a step in the right direction. For these minor offenses, I'm not saying everybody, but there are a lot of people out there that have these minor offenses on their record from, some usually youthful indiscretion, and it can haunt you. And so I think if a period of time passes and you can get those sealed for at least those purposes, so it doesn't continue to be a hindrance in living your life, then I think that's a good thing.
Governor Wolf did some action last week on another aspect of clean slate. Do you follow those? Do you get an opportunity to catch up and brush up on what is actually happening at the legislative level, and maybe even have some input with lawmakers at any point, or is that something a bar association would handle?
So I'm a member of the Pennsylvania Bar Association, also the County Bar Association here, and the American Bar Association, and through those organizations, particularly our state bar is the one that I'm most involved with. And I'm a member of different committees and sections within that bar association. And yes, we have the bar has a legislative agenda that's supported by the members, and so it emanates out of the committees, the sections, and yes, we definitely work to a lot of times it's legal justice sorts of things, getting more access for people to the legal system, and also areas that attorneys in the course of practice, for instance, we talked about a while ago that the divorce laws changed from a 2-year wait to a 1-year wait. There's a waiting period before you can finalize a divorce if one spouse is contesting it. And it used to be 2 years, and it became 1 year. And that law being passed was the direct result of family law attorneys like myself looking at this system and saying, this is broken. I mean, we have folks that want to get a divorce, and you have one spouse that's just able to hold up the process for no good reason for 2 years, whether it's because they're collecting support, which would end at the finalization of the divorce or whatever. So attorneys, in the course of just practicing law, you realize little areas that need to be cleaned up. And then you go through the Bar Association, you say, hey, what can we do about this? And eventually, hopefully you can get the legislator to take notice.
I would guess that there are instances where you look at a law that has been in effect for 30, 40, 50 years or longer, and you say, well, that's just not the world we're living in today. That's an archaic rule that either technology has changed or society mores have changed, and the law needs to change along with it.
Absolutely. And procedural rules, things like expanding electronic filing in the court system, stuff that maybe the public doesn't see, but as attorneys, you realize, well, that stuff can really make the system more efficient. But it's got to be generally a top down. The state's got to authorize that, and then the county decides to do it. So, but when put in place, attorneys know, okay, this is something that's going to allow the courts to free up some resources, and so things like that, and evidentiary issues. When you're in a hearing and you're presenting, evidence like social media and text messages and all these things that we didn't have before, and they're still being treated as though they're a letter. Things like that. We can look at. You change through case law, or you can change through a bill in the legislature. But there are all sorts of issues like that, and that's why the law is so interesting. Is that it's constantly evolving, but sometimes, as you mentioned, maybe not quickly enough. Yeah,
well, one of the things that came to mind as you were talking about that, and I know that we don't generally get into topics of serious crime as during this segment, but you have experience with it too. Is the mandatory minimum sentences for juvenile offenders.
Oh, yeah.
Once that law changed or that rule changed, and it's in the process of changing even now, it morphs a lot, then you have to think to yourself, okay, in the past I've had this client, I've sort of kept them on file in my brain that one day this law is going to change and we can help this person.
Yeah, and it's great whenever a law changes, and if it can be, if it's practical to make it have some retroactive effect, that can be helpful. But yeah, in general, like I said, that's the great thing about the law is that it's not static. And the legal system that we have has served us so well for so long because it can expand and contract and morph to deal with different situations. And so it's it's as a member of the legal community, as a member of the bar, it's always interesting to see those things happen.
Yeah, that's kind of it. This is a fascinating topic of conversation for me. We sort of went in a different direction today than normally we do. It was talking law theory and how laws change and just that whole law community. All right, so folks want to get in touch with you, learn more about what you do and can do for them. What do they need to do?
Sure, you can stop by my office in the Atrium in downtown Indiana. Call me 724-465-5826, or you can always go online to www.westernpalawyer.com.
Thank you, Marshall.
Thanks a lot.
He's Marshall Chriswell, attorney at law, and it is Indiana in the Morning, presented as always by First Commonwealth Bank, here on the voice of Indiana County, WCCS AM 1160, 101.1 FM.